Hi, fellas. It's me, Rudy Tanoka from the Magicians Forum, and I am here with magician Steve Reynolds. Steve, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you.
I just wanted for you to have the opportunity to demonstrate for the fellows some of your work. I know you have you don't call it a magazine, you call it a book.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the magazine realm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of baggage on that term, but it will be a monthly. So
What's your day job? Or is this, are you a magician full time?
I'm a full-time writer and
Wow,
performer, and
man, lucky you. And so you still love it. And I hear that once you're actually doing this for a living, sort of, you kind of lose a little bit of that sense of,
yeah, I can understand that. But it's nice to have. Like, I just picked up a restaurant gig. I hadn't worked restaurants in a number of years, and I really did a deep dive on Marlowe recently over the last 20 years. No, but over the last year. And so I really got into that and figuring out ways to teach it better, his work, the fundamentals. And I did a series called the Marlowe Roadmap. So I
mhm.
did 7 of those, starting with the very fundamental grips and, grips that you see throughout his work, you know, functional grips and moves that you see over and over and over again. And so I was sort of like really focused on that. And you can lose some of the magic that way. But I picked up one of my old restaurants, and you know my love of magic and performing and creating and really came alive. So I'm very excited. And the monthly is really exciting because I started publishing in 2000. That's when almost 20 years ago.
Mm.
And any new venue, any new challenge, any comment somebody makes just makes me want to create and clarify these ideas. And so I have a storehouse of material of my own, and also a nice amount of unpublished Marlowe material. Um, so I'm using the output monthly booklet as a vehicle to get my material out. I used to write for Magic Magazine. I did that for 4 years, I think, and I had my own column. So I had material that I was basically that the Monk's Way column was about me deciphering Brother Hammond. I
Mm.
started working with his stuff since I was about 15. I talked to him one time on the phone, but I was so scared. He answered my question, and I go, "Okay, thanks." Click. I
Oh,
was so nervous. So I never met him, but I was very much influenced and inspired by his work. So,
mm.
and a lot of my material is geared more towards the subtleties and psychology. You mentioned the technical side of my work. Yep. These are tools of the trade, but when I was younger, I was really, did all the Jennings stuff, like the invisible palm, I would do with all the palming. Now I do the subtle switch, the Ackerman subtle switch. So you get a little bit of balance as you get older. So anyway, again, you know, since I was focused a lot on Marlowe's technical stuff and how to teach it, I got you do lose a little bit of the magic. But now that I'm working again or performing, it just came alive. So I have about 6 months already mapped out for this booklet. And what's interesting about this is that I'm also planning a number of other projects. This is just the main monthly output, is
Mm.
what I call it. So it gives me a chance to reintroduce some of my older things, re-examine them. I've just by looking at a few routines, or say one particular one, I've already spawned off two interesting ideas from that. So just doing it creates content and interesting ideas.
Mm.
I guess that's the way I roll, I guess.
Well,
But
so talking about Marlowe, I had mentioned to you before we got on here that I have this volume 2 mint, uh, and I've not made it really hardly through any of the material. It seems really difficult. And I'm not afraid of trying difficult stuff, but there's something really seem intimidating about his material. So how do
Sure.
you make that more accessible to folks like me? Is it? I'm not alone, I'm sure, in that.
No, you're not. Well,
So
first of all, you gotta know that you can't go in there and just pull out something. Well, you can. If you have the focus, you can really zero in on what's there that you can use, and there's ways to do that. These are just study strategies that I learned. One of the things is take your time. You take one thing. When you read a book, you have a tendency to, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency, okay, yeah. You go through it and you're like, yeah, bit'll move. Got it.
yeah.
Well, Marlowe's using original moves. Now, whatever you want to say about his crediting, and we can talk about that as well, because I've studied all that stuff too.
Mm.
But I don't want to get into that negative side of this
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah.
The positive is what was put into print. What can you use? And so the challenge is, since he was such a creative guy and variation on variation, and there's all reasons for that. It was never variations for variation's sake. So it's not like, oh, great, here's another variation I won't be able to do or want to do because it's just a variation. Now, each one has its own strengths, covers a weakness of something else. And by understanding that it's not set in stone, this is this concept of the system, like riffle shuffle systems.
Mm.
I mean, even Erdnase had a system of cutting and shuffling. In combination of these ideas, you produce something really good. And so these were Marlowe's variations had components. He was a machinist by trade. He thought of these things as like a machine with moving parts, pivot points, and all that. And then what are the applications? What does it accomplish? Some people say, method doesn't matter. Well, method does matter.
Mm.
I mean, the method you choose has, I think, Ascanio talks about, the the unseen part of it, the covert, and then there's the overt. Well, the covert affects the overt look of the procedure. And if you have a clunky construction, no amount of presentation is going to cover it's just a slow build or one that doesn't have enough punch. And so what Marlowe did was try to streamline, even though it looks like he added. He was actually, as Rockerbomber points out, a minimalist. Because when you look at even a complex structured trick, the look of it, what the audience sees, is clear and direct. The challenge is, how do you get to that? How do you get that out of the book?
Can you give us an example, maybe demonstrate something?
Well, here's an example. Like from my perspective, as someone that is, teaching this stuff, I do like Skype sessions on. Well, I was recently asked to do a series on riffle shuffle, Marlowe's riffle shuffle work. Well, he said riffle shuffle work, and I just said we're going to learn Marlowe's riffle shuffle work. You got to give him the good stuff first, right? You got to have that foundation. So, but seriously, I'm always on the lookout for things that are in combination, like I was saying. Basic, the fundamentals that are going to crop up throughout this guy's studying of Marlowe's work. So you might have a basic grip. Well, that's going to show up. For example, this angular grip is the same for whether you hold the sides or the ends, as opposed to a higher grip like this. Now, what this does is it provides cover for, say, a side steal if you're going to do that. And the fingers are exactly where they need to be, and with the right amount of focus on finesse, a little bit of finesse, you can really just slide that puppy out. See, the angular grip allows for perfect cover from the front and the sides. So now, in the first Marlowe roadmap, which is that series I put out, I talk about how to go from this position down to the table. And so you can see this grip is exactly the same whether you're holding it by the ends or by the sides. And this crops up in the fingertip peak, in the regular riffle peak, And so I find these moments that reoccur.
Mm.
And so these are the fundamentals that you learn so that when you go into the book, you can just cut out 3 paragraphs because he goes into detail. Why does he go into detail? So you can do the move
Mm.
as opposed to scant detail. And you're like, well, I don't even know, like the daily notebooks, you can't make heads or tails of it.
Right.
I would rather have detail. Marlowe just wanted to establish, well, one, how to do it specifically. I mean, even Erdnase talks about it. It's one thing to know how the move is done or the thing is done. It's another thing to know the exact manner in which it's executed.
Mm-hmm.
Marlowe explained the exact way to execute it.
Which has really influenced, I think, your teaching, because I would recommend anybody to get your DVD here on the Zero Shuffle, because you are meticulous in, like, here's where you grip, you know, and even having us go back to that and say, okay, now when you put that back together, your fingers should remain, you know, back
Right.
at that returning position. But, and it sounds meticulous, and it is, but those little details,
Mm-hmm.
because I can already see the difference. Now, it doesn't, again, it doesn't look like when you're performing it, but I can see a radical difference from what it was to what it is with teaching. So I can see how you're meticulous about those little nuances and details as well. So it's really good.
Yeah, because I saw it, I worked on it, I talked with John on the phone, you know, from Philadelphia. I called Rocker Bomber on the phone, and he sort of guided me over the years in what, not so much where to put my fingers, but where to put my focus.
Mm.
And that was, I think, a lot more important than where to put your fingers in the long run, you know. And so, yeah, I took that approach that Marlowe had and applied it, and applied it to this Zero. The Z is essentially Marlowe's work on the Zero Shuffle that I got good at.
Really?
And then, and then Andy Gladwin said, "Well, could you teach it to me?" This is at a second deal convention when this is before Vanishing. When the English guys came over, it was great. You know, Jack Parker was there. It was great.
Wow.
And got to sit with Jack and talk about Hammond's book. We both loved the Big Yellow Book, you know. And but anyway, Andy asked me to teach it to him, and I, you know, after a while of just mindless practice, you don't know what the heck you're doing. You're doing it really well, but don't try to, like, I don't know what my pinky just did, shifted pressure or something, you know. It's just from over, you know, doing it over and over. Muscle memory, I guess. And so I told Andy, I just can't, I mean, I tried. He says, I have no idea what you're talking about. You know, I'm like, neither do I. And so then it became more of a challenge to figure out how to teach the thing. I never thought of teaching it. I just did it. I wanted to, you know, I learned Brother Hammond's, you know, from Two Shuffles, Harry Lorraine had one of the versions in Apocalypse.
Right.
And I learned that blocky kind of Hammond. And then when I saw Primetime Marlowe, the video that John had put out, Rocker Bomber, I was like, holy moly, that is like. So I never thought of it, and this is important. I never thought of it as a move, you know, like the Zero Shuffle and a little. I'm going to learn the Zero Shuffle. No, it was just like step 3 in the trick. You know, that's why I learned it. I didn't know Zero, who he was, or anything. And I think that's, you know, important to keep and think about moves more in their functionality and not just simply, you know, you look at a Marlowe book. We'll go back to the Marlowe real quick. The riffle shuffle systems: technique, 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 or in the Mint 2, technique, technique, technique. Right?
Yeah.
But how does it all fit together? And so the system of, say, riffle shuffles, you have technique, but their function can be work together. So growing up, I had it in my mind that the Zero Shuffle was its own little entity. And this Dad Stevens Shuffle is the same way. They always talk about the Dad Stevens Shuffle. Well, how do you apply it in the larger context? And so that's where Marlowe comes in, because you start seeing these interconnected ideas that just on first viewing look like this disjointed group of just random variations. But that's not how it works. It's evolutionary card magic, as John calls it.
Mm.
These are small changes. It's like John Gustafaro's 1 degree.
Oh.
Just Marlowe had a ton of it. It's like nobody complains about 10 versions of Oil and Water from 10 different people, but you got 10 versions from one guy. There's a problem.
Yeah. And
at least you can track the ideas and how the guy thought, you know.
Yeah.
That's what Fisher told me a long time ago. You know, you read somebody's book to get into their brain.
Right. Yeah.
Not just to call out ideas and take them for yourself.
Yeah, there's actually the Lazy Man's.
Not to be negative or anything.
No, I hear you. In Apocalypse, there's a section where Marlowe is sharing his work on the Lazy Man's card trick, and there's like 9 different versions, and it's a trip to see his creative, all these different methods. One with memorized deck, one with marked cards. He's really smart. I'm thinking actually of doing that on one of these coming up episodes, focusing on.
Oh, great! Yeah. You know, and it's not, it's like he didn't expect you to learn he said that in a number of his books. You know, I don't expect you to learn all these. It's just my way, you know, creative. He wants to see how many ways he can twist and turn it. And you never know sometimes you don't know where you're going to lead, at least for me. Marlowe seemed to, I don't know, when I read a Marlowe book and I said, well, I would do it this way, and then third variation, that was the way I thought. You know, same idea. But again, it's about finding the method that works best for you. People say, only publish your best method. Well, we know that what's the best method? I mean, look, when I was a kid, when I was younger, I'm only 42, but I like to sound like I'm, you know, when I was a child, you know, in my 20s, there was a trick in volume 4 of the Marlowe magazine. It was a version of Paul Harris's Interlace Vanish. And it used one of my favorite moves of Marlowe is this add-on from the cop, where you scoop up and you load the card. I think it's a lot more direct than natural, or say natural, but you know, just feels a little studied. But having the packet over here and just stealing the card off as you scoop it up. And that's from a classic palm. But at the time, I couldn't really do a classic palm very well in the left hand. So I would have to wait a number of years to get used to that, to retrain my left hand to accept those cards directly. But luckily, Marlowe had a second method. He had a third method too, but we won't get into that because I chose not to do that version, so I don't even think about it. But the point is, he changed the method for those that don't like palming or can't palm. He thought of me. He thinks of you. He thought of his students. Well, Dave Solomon doesn't like mathematical stuff. So he came up with versions for Dave, the kind of magician that Dave is. There's others like him. And so it's all about teaching these ideas and getting them into the hands of people.
Right.
It wasn't, I mean, not to say he didn't want to get credit, obviously, but it wasn't only that.
I see.
So anyway, then he did the load up move. And see, so now the packet switch or the packet add-on happens here on the deck. So this way you have a method that you can do if you can't palm. So then I learned to palm in my left hand. And guess what? I went back to method 1, and those other methods mean nothing. I mean, they mean something. They meant a great deal at the time. So I chose the method that suited me best. And then I was able to, knowing the other versions as I improved, I was able to do the more sophisticated version.
You were talking about, before we were actually here having this interview, about some riffles, shuffles that were intended to be kind of throw-offs for magicians. I'm sure that we don't do stuff for magicians, but it's always kind of cool to have that in your arsenal. Can you just demonstrate What that
Sure, I can show you this. So this is what I mentioned in regards to the foreword to Marlowe Magazine #4. Now, one of the main rules of reading Marlowe is don't skip over anything and take your time. You're not going to learn everything, I promise. I've tried.
Yeah.
It takes a long, long time, Rudy.
I bet.
Right. But the key is never skip over anything, even the forward. The real secret, and I'll get to this, because this is aside from it being a throw off for magicians, there's another point to this why I had mentioned it. But the secret is knowing that there's tricks within tricks, there's ideas with ideas.
Yes.
He'll deviate. He's more stream of consciousness. The ideas, you just keep writing. So you just need to be able to learn to read it like an overview and gut it. Like determine where is this a technical description? Okay. Those 3 paragraphs are one little thing. Then there's a commentary about that thing that maybe mentions something else. So, this is this particular bit of information. It's a move I already know. So I'm just going to pass that. And once I learn the rest of this little segment, I'll go back and reread that section to see if I missed any detail. Yeah. But trying to do it all at once in one gulp, it's difficult until you get used to doing it automatically. And so one of the rules that I had, that maybe Dave Solomon had he had rules to reading Marlowe. And but one of the really important rules is never skip over anything. You may double back and reread and things like that. So you don't skip over the forward, because there's sometimes ideas in the forward, or a bit of history, or a bit of psychology, or something extra. So in this case, I found the riffle, shuffle, throw-offs. They're controls. Okay, so I'll show you what they look like. I'll show you the first one, and that's the main one that I want to talk about. So you have a card peeked at. Okay. I'll just assume you said stop.
Okay.
We don't have time for this, Rudy. So remember that card. Oop. Let's do that again. I'm not Marlowe. I'm not a machine, Rudy. This is the first card trick I've done today. So.
All right.
So tip big. All right. So say stop. I'll let you do it.
Stop.
All right. Right. So, and we lose that in the pack. So we give the cards, actually, we'll cut them one more time. We'll give those a couple shuffles. Actually, let's get rid of those top cards here. There we go. Mm-hmm. And so anybody following that would assume that I was retaining that selection on top. And then there's the humor. Malone talks about the humor. The more you read Marlowe, the more you see the sarcasm in some of his techniques. It's amazing, because that's funny as hell to my mind. And it's on bottom. That's the thing. Oh, yeah. It's on the bottom. So here's the moves. First of all, there's a little throw off right at the beginning. Normally, if you want to get a break above the card, you would let one riffle off and get a break, right? Well, he would hold the break still below it, but it looks like he flipped up, but he still got the break under it.
Dude, that's
so that click off means nothing except to the.
That's so true. That's great.
Well, the big thing was don't get complacent. Some of these kinds of things and some of other things in print were meant, and you're going to be surprised at this, I'm sure, was meant as satire.
Really?
Yeah. It's a commentary on the way magicians think and how they get blind spots and they lose sight of the effect. So that's another tricky part. When you see 1,200 versions of the collectors in the beginning of the Unexpected Card Book, if you read through those, you can see the sarcasm. It is a commentary on variation for variation's sake. And he said, "Oh, you want variations? Oh, here's variations, and this is not how you do it." You know, but he put it under his name, so everybody said, "Wow, look at this crappy version! 100 versions." When really it was meant to make fun of a book called The Bottom Collectors. Wasn't happy with it didn't take it in any direction other than what it's going around in circles. So it was meant as a satire.
Fascinating.
But people look at it and say, "Well, look at all these crappy versions."
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So now you got that break. That's a little thing you didn't see. You learn something new every day. So what's interesting, since you have the breakup below it now, they think it's above it.
Yeah.
Assuming that they know. He then did what we call a delayed triple undercut. So classic control, of course, is the double undercut, but I still got a break above 12. So I pause a moment, and then so they think of that pause. It's like the pause that convinces. Phil Goldstein's lecture notes way back in the day, where Max may even now, but he talked about the pause that convinces.
No, I didn't know. What is this pause that convinces?
It just means that instead of doing a control and then going right into the action, you wait a moment and let that sink in, that you're not controlling anything. And so Marlowe took advantage of that, and then he cut one more time.
That's good.
just okay, it's on top. Nope. Or is it? We're not sure. So now you would cut and you hold back. So since the selection's on the bottom, but you're going to pretend that it's on top, and you riffle and hold a big block. Not too big. You don't want to be too obvious, but that's pretty damn big. You want to do it openly, not covered, because you want them to see where that is. This is one time where you don't want the block to be covered. Right? So they're like, yeah, we're on to you. Now you do this, and as an afterthought, you notice that these top cards, you say, well, let's get rid of the top cards, and you allow that to flick up, past, and then drop it on top, and then it's lost.
Great. I like
Okay, and so that's on the bottom. Right? So I'm putting this into output 2. Okay? And you say, well, anybody could read one of my pet peeves is like, and I don't want to call anybody out, but just in general, taking a book taking a book, classic book, and running through each item in the book.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. It's good to see these things in action. It's good to have an expert show it, kind of thing. But what else are you bringing to the? Because I could read it. It may take me 20 years to get through all the material, but I can do this on my own. I don't need somebody necessarily just to show me.
Right.
My question is, what do you bring to the table? So we have this as an example. This is not good to simply take an item out of a book and simply put it in your magazine as if it's something new, but it's rare. Even guys that have Marlowe magazine number 4, it's rare because they probably didn't read the foreword anyway. Yeah. They tried to skip right to the good stuff. So what am I bringing to this, and why am I putting an item from somebody else's book into my magazine or my booklet? Don't call it a magazine. No, don't call it that. Oh, great. We get to send you money and never get the books. Wonderful. Too much baggage on that term. But anyway, so what am I bringing? I am bringing knowledge of what's coming up. In other words, within a study of Marlowe's riffle shuffle work, there are consistent techniques, grips, like I was saying with the starting grip and bring it down. And so what fundamentals are there? You may not do this as a throw-off. You may only work for laymen that don't care the cards on top because they're having too much of a good time. They're just excited to be there because you're such a good entertainer. Um, but as a teacher and trying to get guys to take the books off, like your Mint, I want you to take that book off the shelf
Yeah.
and get something out of it because it's a great book.
Yeah.
So long story short, I know I talk a lot.
Oh, that's good.
It's just I'm excited. I love this stuff, and I want people to love it too. So, and get my book. I try to give as much as I can, you know. So what do we have here? Is we have a basic riffle shuffle, and which you say basic, or I say basic, but there are elements that need to sort of be there, like with the Z for the proper cover. That angular grip gives you that cover 360. And timing is an issue there too. But so we can talk about the fundamentals of just this basic shuffle. Block work, holding back, leaving a bed, holding back a block and letting it drop on top. Another fundamental. These things don't seem like much, but when you get into the context of a larger body of ideas or techniques, it's important to keep on track with that. So these small things add up. All right. And the other thing is this pull up, getting used to, because sometimes you can get that pivot out like that. And so understanding pressure, shifting pressure, and also being able to put these things into action. It's one thing to practice, okay, I'm going to practice riffling the cards. I'm going to practice riffling the cards. So you got to get these things. It's like a baseball player throwing the ball. You got to follow through. And I'm just looking for things to help guys follow through with some of these basics. Marlo did that same thing as well. He would combine ideas or just show you one idea in a basic context. So what they would call a trite trick. Everybody says Marlo had trite tricks. They were basic tricks, not inspired. But those were like ways to establish a basic idea that would later be used in a more robust way. So it's just like a placeholder for that move, for that idea. So that crops up too. And I was going to say something, but I lost my train of thought. I was on that other thing, but anyway, so that's really the reason why I'm sharing that in the latest output, because I want to give a practice strategy when you do get into Marlo's books or any other book that has a number of techniques that are interlocking. And I don't know of that in that way. I can't think of any other. Maybe Carl Fulvis's riffle shuffle thing, but from what I see, it's a lot of different isolated techniques. They're not designed to work together. Marlo's riffle shuffle systems was designed to work together. So you can skip back. You can go to the last book, the riffle shuffle finale, and go through each item and just look for the basics that are described in the first book. When you say, this is what I need to focus on if I want to get to here. You know, so those are just, instead of trying to dump it all and wanting to learn everything and not even knowing which way you're going. That's why I call it the Marlo roadmap. These are little points on the map. It's not everything, because you got to wind up doing the work. You got to do the work.
Now you're talking about some unpublished material. How do you get your hands on that? What kind of connection do you have with Marlo that allows you to have access to the stuff that nobody else does?
Well, when I was a kid, and just briefly, I didn't know magicians growing up. I wasn't around magicians, just like anybody that's not in the magic world. But I wasn't around. I mean, Mark D'Souza lived 20 minutes away from me. I didn't know that. I wasn't connected to anybody. So then I got Genie Magazine when it was still out west, and the Hammond ad and Joe Stevens, or the Joe Stevens ad for the Hammond tape, was what got me going. You know, the Joe Greater Magic Video Library, beautiful. Volume 38 just killed me. It was the first time I saw card magic. You know, I mean, I had counts, cuts, moves, and subtlety, but I didn't know what these were used for. I had no idea. I got it from the magic shop that I'd only been to like twice. But anyway, so I got really into just counting, and I got rhythm. You know, you didn't even think it was possible, but I got rhythm. And so when I got the Hammond stuff, I was already doing an Elmsley count. I was already doing a Hammond count. I was already doing the moves. Even the Visor was in counts, cuts, moves, and subtleties. So I was all ready to reconstruct. He didn't even explain the underground transpo. But I was, just with that little bit of knowledge, I was able to reconstruct that. Having never seen, I'm no genius, but you know, in that moment, I just felt like a mastermind. But turns out it's not true. No, but anyway, so I was really got into it strong. So, and I guess I just had nerves of steel. I would call up magicians, magic shops. You know, I'd got Card Finesse 2, you know, in 92. I got the Hammond when it was like 1991. The following year, got Card Finesse 2 when it came out. L&L. That's Rocker Bomber's book, I'm sure you know.
Yes.
And so that's my introduction to Marlowe. Richard Kaufman had published the Hammond book. I'd got that when I was 18. And so through Richard, because I would call him up, like from the magazine, I would call him up on the phone. And he was nice. He tried to answer. It was not his favorite topic, Ed Marlowe, to you know. So he gave me John's number. So I was about 15, 16, and I called John. And he was really the first magician that I talked with to any great extent. He was my first friend in magic. And when I visited in 98, there was a SAM convention here in New Orleans. I was still in Philadelphia. And I came to visit John after 6 years on the phone with him. Like maybe 4 times a week, 1 to 2 hours at a clip.
Wow.
And just heavy study and performing in my local, you know, just for friends and in the bars and whatever. That's where I learned to perform, in the back room, you know. Loved it. So anyway, I just started zeroing in on John's stuff, reading Marlowe. And eventually, I mean, I was just a very strong studier and working on the stuff. And it's just circumstances. I moved here and I had put enough work in to, I guess, show John that I could deal with some of these items that are important and help to continue to promote Marlowe's work, his teacher, his father in magic, and Bill's father in magic, and all the students. And I'm up for the challenge. So that's why. I mean, and then I was so happy I got boxes of stuff, and some of it is in the Conjuring Arts Center. A lot of correspondence is there, but I have a lot of notes of unpublished stuff here, and so I want to use the output to help promote that stuff as well.
Is it mostly slides, or are you actually teaching certain effects as well that you
yeah, all effects, moves, you know, whatever, you know, it's not just a hodgepodge. I want to have a focus, even if they're different moves or different tricks, somehow we connect them.
Yeah.
You know, within the book. So it becomes like a little, not a course, but you know, just a little dive into a particular set of ideas.
Yeah.
But what's nice is I can make it whatever the heck I want. It's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
I could make it whatever I want. So right now, I have a balance of sleights and subtleties and designed to be performed for people. Tricks that are designed to be performed for sometimes laymen, sometimes magicians, sometimes both. I mean, I'm a session lizard, a lounge lizard, I guess, at conventions. I don't know what you call us, but the 12 hours at a table, and you don't even think of food or using the restroom, quite frankly. TMI, but it's true.
Well, maybe
I'm still holding it from Dallas.
I know it's early. Well, it's early where I'm at. But would you feel comfortable showing just demonstrating one of these things that can be found, if in your output? Now you only have one book out, right? Output 2 is not going to come.
Output 2 is coming out next week. I'm almost done. I'm finishing editing, and it's a physical book. It's a physical book, and you get digital content. You get the PDF and all the videos. Now, if you sign up for the monthly, because it's going to be every month, I have an automatic payment. It's $25 plus shipping. If you're overseas, it's $25 a month. You get all the digital content, and after 3 months, I bundle the 3 issues and ship them. This way, it's one. I know there's a lot of tax. Sometimes there's extra taxes on overseas packages.
Man, $25 is that's good. And
but there's more. There's more because I'm also reissuing a magazine that John and Marlo and Lee Freed, originally from here, from Louisiana, they put together the Allram file.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a later, Marlo's, not later stuff, it was a lot of the stuff, some of the stuff that I have in the boxes were filtered through these 16 issues.
Mm.
And I'm digitizing them, cleaning them up. I was able to because I have photocopies, sanctioned photocopies. There's a lot of unsanctioned photocopies and scans and all that, and I was able to get my partner to digitize it and clean it up and basically redo as per the original layout, but just cleaned it up a little bit of the Allram file. And so each month, along with the output and the digital video that goes with it, you also get the PDF of Allram 1 or Allram 2, whatever it happens to be. Right. But every other month, you get Unlocking the Allram file, which is my commentary on the issue.
Wow.
So I bring all my Marlo knowledge to this issue, and I have original photographs, original notes, correspond all the original correspondence for the Allram file material. So I have original photos. So I'm going to incorporate those in. So basically, you get 2 magazines in one, even though we're not calling Output a magazine.
That sounds really, really, really great, man. I'll become a subscriber because that sounds like a great deal.
So, but anyway, let me show you. This is one that I had worked out a number of years ago. In fact, it was in my first book. And I'll just demonstrate. I'll just run through the original handling and show you what I did. Okay. So we'll do a sandwich effect. We'll use the 2 red queens. I'll just run through this so you can see.
Sure.
So I'll demonstrate the method here so you can see, and then I'll show you the thing. So I reverse the bottom card secretly, and I drop it on face up queen, and this one goes on top. Now, this is interesting because when I first started doing this, always one-on-one. I always just did a one-on-one thing for this particular trick. And I would spread the deck out, and I'd do a little block push-off so you see the 2 queens.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would take a card. Now, they would look at it, and in the act of looking at it, I would jog the card.
And that's the queen that you jogged, right?
I jog the queen. I steal it to the top. And I just, in an economic way, I just put it in the tilt. I just put it
Gotcha.
slanted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically sliding on top, but just make sure it doesn't go flush.
Gotcha.
And then you put it into tilt. However, I started doing this, and this is the value of performing. You would never think of this. I would never have thought of this. That if you work for multiple people, I did it this way. I apologize. I'd have a card selected and then do that way. Because by the time he was able to show it around, I was already done. It was when I was working for the single person that the problem was this. By the time I square up to now, it's too late.
Wow.
He's already looked at it and looking for the next one.
Right.
So I decided to do it this way. Failing to improve the method, he changes the method. Are you sick of that yet? I mean, everybody does. All right, so you riffle down and then toss that out, and now look where you are. You're ready to go, and you have the time. So this is just one of those, like, I don't know if John would call this a 1 degree. Gustafaro would call it a 1 degree. But it's just those little things like that. Anyway, so now you would go into the thing. Well, I lectured one of my first lectures in Detroit years ago, and a guy was having trouble angling the card and getting the card into the places. I could never get the card palmed, and it was because he wasn't holding the cards correctly.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't able. The hand wasn't in the proper position. So this stuck with me. You know, what is it that the guy's missing? And that later led to these Marlowe roadmaps that I'd done. So anyway, so this idea of eliminating the side steal, again, and not to simplify. I mean, I don't care about some guys are very much into make it easy, make it easy, make it easy, make it easy, and I don't think that. Sometimes it's great to do it that way, but sometimes you miss the part that makes the trick good.
Sure.
So, but I simplified this in this way. So I'll show you what I did. So you take the queens, show the queens, you peel one, put it on the bottom, and the other one goes to the top. And so now I've got 2 here and that X card here, right in position, as if I did the side steal. And so, and I'll just show you this, and I'll run through the rest of the trick so you see.
Well, that's what you did.
Yeah. And so what you do is you have these on the face, you pick up a third one. Now you do that this way because you don't want them to see the discrepancy unless you don't care, and you don't think that they do, you know.
Sure.
You have to make that choice. So now I've got 3, and now I flip this, hold that, like a 10 position, and I peel the X card onto the face, and this is a double.
Dude.
And I flip it on top.
That's good.
And so that was my fix on that little problem with the side steal. Just because of that one guy in Detroit. Can you believe that? You know, inspiration comes in the strangest ways.
I like it. That's good.
Okay, so here's the effect. So the spectator chooses one. Right? Put those queens in separate spots. Right? And we'll put this one near the bottom. So they're separate. And this is Marlowe's ace X ace, where they separate spots and they shoot through the deck and catch one.
That's great. That's good.
Okay. Good. So let's double back and I'll show you how to do this because there's a little subtlety here. And this is the trick, the original way, which I also end it the same way with this new version, where I first decided to use a subtlety instead of a move. That was a major moment, and it's just a small thing, but it changed my way of thinking. I decided to think like Hammond in that moment and not Marlowe. Though Marlowe is the king of subtlety as well.
Hmm.
But that's a whole other interview. We could be here forever, all right, answering these questions. So, I'll show you what I mean when I chose subtlety. So you get to this point, there's the double. Do this. No need to be cozy. Just, lift up in the back or dip down, as they say. But everybody's looking at the card anyway. Just a little touch.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're going to tilt. Now, and I'm going to, this is how I roll, because I remember little things like this. Like there was a thread on your on your board. Yeah. On the glide.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I had mentioned, I don't know if it's up there or not, but I had posted a couple things about Marlowe's, and somebody had mentioned Marlowe's push off from Mint 1, where you actually use the nail to push 2 cards forward.
Man.
And that's all it is you seem to push 1 card, but you're using your nail to gauge.
Wow.
There's 2. And there's 3.
Dang.
So it's not complicated. It's just a matter of finesse. You got to know how much to press.
Right.
And so that's the sandwich. Now, Cliff Green has a pre-break, and he does the same thing. So it's more sure, but you have a get ready.
Right.
Marlowe's, there's no get ready.
Man.
Except you got to cut your nail at the right length. Sometimes I would let it grow, but he had the nail push off and all kinds of different gauging with the nail. So anyway, you don't have to do that. What I normally do is I lift up 3. I just bevel it, and I riffle up until I spot 3, and then I push forward. Yeah. Now, originally, I take this, and this is 3 cards, and I did a push and change. You know, that old move where you
sure.
Card technique. Now, it was Alan Ackerman I did this to, and this is one of my first tricks I came up with, or method-wise. He didn't like the coziness of that fiddle. It's a little bit of a fiddle. Not too much, maybe too much of a finesse there, perhaps. But alternatively, you can get the triple or just the 3-card block, put it in here, and just do that.
Right. Yeah. Now, do you have to be concerned about the thickness of that? I mean, I can see your forefingers covering.
I usually do this. No, you tip it down.
Yeah. Not a big deal.
The first person you got to lie to be a good magician is yourself.
Yeah. That's good.
So if you believe it, I mean, Slidini was right. If you believe it, they believe it. But yeah, I mean, I tend to just do things like that. But you do that, we'll put that about halfway down. So, but that's not the hard part, Rudy. That's the easy part. The hard part is when I take this bottom card off. Now, normally, I mean, you would put this in there so it's the correct way, right? Well, originally I did that. That's the X card. And I would try to I did it here, but see how that's like bunched together here.
Yeah, you can see
the biased ribbon spread, right? But it never worked.
Yeah.
I mean, here I prove, whenever you're trying to prove something, it always proves you wrong.
Right.
Like now it's like, okay, finally I can do it. So then my buddy Mark Aspiazu suggested a move monkey from way back, incidentally, wanted me to do a reverse of some kind. Not that one, but that's what I mean. I couldn't think of one that would work, especially at that moment, when it's the moment where the condition is, you want it to be clean. So that's when I first asked the question, what would Hammond do? And Hammond would bluff the heck out of it. So what I do instead is I pull this out, and instead of focusing on this card because it's face down, I open this up wide near the bottom, so it's just a small little block. And I say, and we'll put the other one all the way near the bottom, and I go very slowly, and I focus here, and I just put that in, and I put it in the right way. I mean, the correct way with the deck. But just by changing the focus, that gave some cover. And now you snap, of course, and you're clean as a whistle. You don't have to worry about this over here.
Wow.
Now, before you say, well, that's too bold, Paul Cummins did this.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, yeah. Hey, if Paul got fooled, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyway, yeah, it's all about focus. And then, you know, back then I didn't know anything about inattentional blindness or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Hammond did things out in the open.
Right.
But anyway, so that is so what I do is aside from just teaching the trick, I talk about what's the backstory on it? What were my influences? These things, you know, people publish stuff all the time. It's like, well, this is inspired by Ponce. You know, the first version of this kind of effect happened, you know, was published by Ponson in 1438. It's like, really cool. Well, what made you go, yeah? It wasn't that.
No.
It's one thing to give credit, you know, to originators and all, but what about your personal history? And people want to know, I think, or enjoy the story behind tricks, I guess. At least we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in there. We'll see. But this is my way, again, of connecting with my material to other people and listen and having the access of social media and your site and, you know, I have a YouTube channel now. I'm going to start. I'm not really, I look casual now, you know, because we're live or we're doing this, but, you know, it's tough getting on camera.
Oh,
I'm a writer, you know, I like hiding behind words, but I'm feeling a lot more confident on the camera now. And so I hope to continue to produce these things. And so the YouTube channel I've got up and working on a new website so that all the digital content will be housed in an easy way. Because I know I've got so much stuff on my computer. I don't know what the heck I have anymore. I know my library like the back of my hand. I don't know my digital library. Really. So finding a way for me to organize the material and for me, so I know where things are, but also the guys that get this. So we're working on a new site, and so all the video content and the PDFs and things like that will all be there.
Well, do you want to give us just a little preview? Just you can tell us what you're going to be sharing in your lecture. Just to give the fellows, I mentioned it at the beginning, but in October specifically the 19th, Saturday, October 19th, Steve is going to be giving the Magicians Forum a lecture, and so and that'll be at 2 p.m. Pacific. Do you want to just tell us what it is that you plan to teach us?
Yeah, I'm going to go over some of the stuff in the two outputs and a couple unpublished Marlowe items, and you know, go over some of my favorite tricks using some sleight of hand, some subtleties, and how to combine those things, how I put things together, but all these things have been worked out for performing in my restaurant, seated or standing, and so it's close-up card magic, and not to be confused with Harry's book. This will be different stuff. Anyway, yeah, so that'll be the content. It's just really direct visual magic without being flourishy. Go over some fundamentals so you can, those that want to progress, and again, not to emphasize sleight of hand and technique. You know, to my mind, advanced does not mean more moves. it's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Advanced is not more technique. It's it's knowing what to use for the right circumstances, how to combine subtlety, psychology. What do you get from your audience, and how does that affect the choices that you make when it comes to the method? Because method does matter to the grand effect that you're presenting. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about, and with some really strong examples and stuff you can take with you and do them. So there'll be some things that you'll work on, and then things you can do right away. Yeah. But it'll still combine the ideas that we'll be talking about.
That's cool. And many of these things have been tried out. And you said you had just recently got that gig back. You mentioned in one of your emails that you hadn't really knocked the dust off a little bit, right? I mean, in terms of you hadn't really performed for folks, and so you felt like you're fumbling and dropping cards and stuff like that, which sounds really.
Oh yeah, that was
dropping.
Yeah, the first night trying to get back into the groove. Yeah, but the next night, oh man, the following Tuesday, oh man, I was back. It felt really good and get good audiences, and yeah, that first night was rough.
Were you seated? Is when you do your magic, do you stand up or are you seated like this?
Sometimes, depends on the size of the table or the group. If they're very want to see me, or if it's a repeater or a group that's eaten and it's
Mm-hmm.
Able, I'll sit down and we'll have a little powwow and have some fun.
Wow,
I prefer it that way, but you get used to. Well, on the street I had a table and I stood, so I had that working for me. I learned a lot, transferring things I learned from doing some stand-up, not a lot, doing a number of street, couple of years doing that. Bringing that back to my original venue is just eye-opening. It's almost, once I get into the groove, it just feels like a seamless, fun show, really good.
Tell us where we can get a hold of, how we can get a hold of you, and whether it's to get our hands on output, or also for Skype lessons. I mean, how do we get in touch with you, and how much are the Skype lessons, by the way, anyhow?
Well, they're $50 a lesson, so it's like an hour or so. Depends on what we talk about. It depends on what we're doing. If we're going for the long haul, like some guys will buy 10 lessons and they will want me, like one guy from Australia says, I want to go through the Hammond book.
Wow.
So it's basically me bringing my years of experience with Hammond and Marlowe that these guys want to have me tutor them on how to get into this. Some of these things are intimidating, as you know.
Well, for sure.
And so that's the idea. Usually technique, like, shuffles, the Zero shuffle. We learn a lot about technique in general just by learning about the riffle shuffle. Timing, pressure, shifting pressure, just finesse. How do you get the touch, How do you get the knack? And so that's what I zero in on in the Skype sessions. So they're $50 a lesson. And so you can go to my website, stevereynoldsmagic.com. There's a contact part. My private email, which I've had forever, is seek52, SEEK52 at hotmail.com. Old school.
Old school is right, or at AOL.com. I mean, that's really
My computer still starts.
Okay, so that's your schedule, and then same if they want to get output, they go to Steve Reynolds.
Yeah, you can go, but keep in mind that it's best to get the monthly auto, because that way you get all the all-ram stuff as well.
Right.
And we dig into one of the great underground magazines, the all-ram file. So by doing the automatic payment, you just get content every month. It's like a book club, really.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve, for taking time.
You're welcome.
To talk, and I'm going to become a subscriber, and I'll finally knock the dust off Mint here and start really digging into.
Yeah. Well, let me know what you're working on, and if you want to talk, I'd love to.
Great, man. And we'll look forward to your lecture in October. So, fellas, thank you for taking some time to watch us. And again, go visit Steve Reynolds' website. I'm going to put the link down here. And I'm sure you're going to dig what it is that he's got. So I appreciate you again, Steve, and I look forward to seeing you in October, okay?
Thanks, Rudy. Take care, man.
My brother. Take care. See ya. Bye-bye, guys. All right, my man.